not all my colleagues agree with me, but this Tata versus Mahindra in the battle for EV supremacy, to me, this is the most important test of the year. And let me tell you why. I remember the time not that long ago when testing Indian cars or motorcycles always came with a caveat. It's good, but the power could be better, NVH could be better, quality could be better. Today though, there are no ifs or buts. These two electric cars, they need no favors, no allowances. These are the best cars in this new premium electric SUV segment. There are rivals. The Creta Electric, not a patch. The BYD Atto 3, BYD the world's largest EV manufacturer, but the Atto 3 does not compete on price or spec. Maruti Suzuki, well, they did show the e Vitara at the Auto Expo, but it's still not here, and the reason for that is that it cannot compete with these two electric cars behind me. But which amongst these two, Tata or Mahindra, is the best? Let's find out and start with the drag race. We are testing the top of the line variants. 75 kilowatt hour battery pack, 79 kilowatt hour battery pack. But the Harrier EV has more power, 304 bhp versus 282 bhp. More torque, 504 Newton meters versus 380 Newton meters. But the Harrier is also 2.3 tons. This is 2.2 tons. Drag race, which wins? Let's find out. Okay, lined up at the drag strip, I've got the Harrier EV in boost mode. This is the all-wheel drive, the QWD. So it's got more power, more torque, also better traction because all-wheel drive compared to the 9e, which is only rear-wheel drive. Kind of foregone conclusion, this drag race, but nothing like a real-world test to see how much quicker the Harrier is compared to the 9e.
3, 2, 1, go!
And immediately the Harrier pulls a lead on the 9e. At launch itself, it just takes off and goes. At 200 meters, it's got a 2-car length gap to the 9e. The Harrier Electric is definitely faster than the 9e, clearly faster. On paper, the gap is a few tenths, but in the real world, the gap is 2 car lengths. So clearly the Tata is quicker than the Mahindra. Now the claim figures, the Harrier takes 0 to 100 in 6.3 seconds, whereas the Mahindra does it in 6.8 seconds. And in the real world, on our testing, 0 to 100, 6.5 seconds for the Harrier, and the 9e took 7.3 seconds. So actually the delta of the 9e from claim to real world figures is quite large compared to the Harrier. And that's probably down to all-wheel drive actually reducing the effects of the traction surfaces. Because all-wheel drive, well, you get the grip, you get the performance, and you can put down the power better. Now, in terms of top speed, that's where the Mahindra has the edge. Real, genuine 200 kilometers per hour top speed on the Mahindra, 180 kilometers per hour on the Harrier. Now, we can't talk about EVs and not talk about range. There are too many figures to remember. So I got my Samsung Galaxy Fold 7 here with my cheat sheet. The claimed range for the Harrier EV, that's 627 kilometers on the MIDC cycle, and the 9e is 656 kilometers. So the 9e has got better range. Now, interestingly, in terms of efficiency, both these are bang identical. So what KMPL is to the combustion world, kilometers per kilowatt hour is to the EV world. And both these delivered 3.7 kilometers per kilowatt hour on our testing cycle. That includes driving to our location, the testing, the drag races, all put together, 3.7 kilometers per kilowatt hour. That's actually the worst you can get. On regular driving, you will definitely get much more. Now, in terms of charging, on the Harrier EV, you get a 7.2 kilowatt wall box. On the 9e, you can also option an 11.2 kilowatt wall box charger, the AC charger. Now, with the 7.2 kilowatt wall box charger, the Harrier EV takes 10.7 hours for a full charge. The Mahindra takes 30 minutes more. Now, on the 11.2 kilowatt hour charger, the Mahindra takes 8 hours for a full charge. On a DC fast charger, the Mahindra can take charge at up to 180 kilowatt, whereas the Harrier can only take charge up to 120 kilowatt. 20 to 80% 25 minutes, 20 to 80%, 20 minutes. So that's the range and all the charging. Rear wheel drive, now that is the game changer. Starting with a clean sheet of paper, that gave Mahindra's engineers the freedom to throw everything that they could at this vehicle. And Mahindra's engineers said that for a 2-ton vehicle, they needed not front wheel drive, but rear wheel drive to give it dynamism. And that really worked. Now, there's no way of telling for sure whether the Harrier was always meant to be natively rear wheel drive, or maybe at the start of the journey it was front wheel drive and then they switched to rear wheel drive. But fact of the matter is that Mahindra, they were the first to do rear wheel drive, and that made the entire industry collectively pull up their socks. This might look like a diesel Harrier, but it is not an ICE to EV conversion. It gets a new platform, it's got a flat floor, it's got rear wheel drive, it's got revised rear suspension. This is a new vehicle. It drives also very differently from the diesel Harrier. And also, the Harrier EV is the only one to get all-wheel drive. Now, Tata Motors calls it QWD, but this is all-wheel drive. And if you want another all-wheel drive vehicle, an electric all-wheel drive vehicle, you'll have to nearly double your outlay for the BYD seal. So on that front at least, Tata Motors, they get another point. In terms of suspension, the XEV 9e gets 5-link independent rear suspension along with semi-active dampers. This also has a slightly longer wheelbase, and overall it is longer than the Harrier. The Harrier, this also gets independent rear suspension. This is 4-link independent suspension, and it gets FDD dampers or FSD dampers. But in terms of sheer sophistication of this platform, it's the Mahindra that takes the win in this round. But what's better to drive? What do they feel like on the road? Let's find out. We start with the 9e, the more familiar of the two SUVs. Now, we drove this last year, we were extremely impressed by it, and the more time I spend in these Mahindra electric SUVs, the B6 in particular, the more I'm impressed by it. Now, in terms of the chassis sophistication, the sophistication with which it puts down its power, the sophistication with which it rides over bad roads and deals with speed breakers, it's all pretty impressive. The only real thing that I can criticize is that Mahindra, they always put two light steerings in their car. Starting with the XEV 700, I always say that the steering, it could be a little heavier, and that in turn makes the car feel more connected. But all the steering weight is too light. But apart from that, honestly, the way this has been engineered, the dynamics of the 9e, very impressive. Now, I know it lost the drag race to the Harrier Electric, but in isolation, this is a pretty fast car. And it's the same with all electric cars. The ease with which it builds up speed so effortlessly, there's no noise. And in fact, that brings me to another point. This has got acoustic glass, it's got foam in the tires, and all of this isolates the occupants from the world outside. In terms of refinement, it's actually, again, very good. Now, this is something that I will point out when I drive the Harrier, but I've got the aircon running, it's nice and cold inside, 20 degrees, and there is no noise of the blower. There's actually no noise inside the car. I can hear a bit of wind roar around the mirrors, but that's about it. The isolation, the NVH, it's all very, very good. And then the way it rides over bumpy patches, again, seriously impressive. Ergonomically too, spot on. If there's one thing that I would suggest, it's that the seats, they don't have enough side bolstering, so they don't hug you as nicely as the Harriers does. And also, I would like the seat to go down a little bit more. Here, you're feeling like you're sitting on top of the car. I would like to feel like I'm sitting inside the car, within the car, and the seat doesn't go low down enough. But that apart, nothing else to criticize. And that brings me to my favorite part of any drive, the twisties. I should also point out the brake response and feel, again, very good. But these tires, they squeal heck of a lot. There's too much noise from it. Low rolling resistance EV tires. And you put that aside, and the way the 9e goes around corners, it's sure-footed, it's planted. There's not too much in the way of body roll. Remember, this has got the semi-active dampers, and that adjusts itself to the road conditions, to the pace at which you're driving, the enthusiasm with which you're driving, and it all makes for a very cohesive package. Remember what I said at the start, where we always had to make allowances for Indian cars that, yeah, it's good, but this, but that. This feels like a European car. If the steering had a little bit more weight, it would feel like a German car, honestly. And that, to me, an Indian manufacturer making a car that feels like a German car, that's the highest praise indeed. I should also mention the brake feel, the brake pedal response, the immediacy of the brakes. That's also very good. It doesn't feel spongy. It just feels perfect, in fact. Hitting a few twisties. The front end response is good. There's a fair bit of understeer, to be honest, probably down to the tires, making sure that we get efficiency from the battery pack. The ESP cutting in pretty aggressively, working overtime. But it's carrying a fair bit of speed. And the fact is that because there is no noise, and that sense is masked, you don't realize how fast you're actually going. Because now when I'm looking down at the speedo, that's when I realize that, shit, I'm really carrying a fair amount of speed over here. And it's doing all this while feeling safe and secure. And the other thing about rear wheel drive cars, when you step on it, if there's a little gravel on the road or if it's a little wet, normally you get that wriggle from the front wheels and from the steering wheel. Here, there's no front end wriggle. And that just adds that layer of sophistication to everything that the 9e delivers. The first Indian car to actually feel like that, where there's no torque steer, where the front tires are not scrabbling for grip, where you get a bit of movement from the rear, which is so cool. Now, of course, if you want to drift, the BE6 is the Mahindra electric for you, not the 9e. The 9e is the more composed, calm, the more grown-up of the two. And it definitely feels grown up in its road manners. Anyway, that was the 9e. Let's go check out what the Harrier EV feels like. First impression of the Harrier EV. Number one, it immediately feels quicker and more urgent than the 9e. Number two, the seats. It holds you better. There's better side support, and you can slide the seats down lower, so you feel like you're sitting within the car and not on top of it. And third, it feels a little more rugged, a little bit more like an SUV than the 9e. So that starts with the steering wheel. It feels a little bit more meaty. The controls feel more chunky, more solid. I'm not saying solid in terms of build quality, but just that general sense of being a little bit more robust. You get that in the Harrier Electric. This, after all, is kind of based on the diesel Harrier, and the diesel Harrier is kind of based on the previous generation. Actually, it goes over speed breakers slightly better than the 9e, but it has a spongier brake pedal than the 9e. The 9e would have stopped in time. The Harrier EV did not stop in time, so that's why we went faster and harder over that speed breaker. So yeah, there are pros and cons to the Harrier. So what was I saying? The diesel Harrier based on the previous generation of the Discovery Sport. Of course, Discovery Sport is all aluminum, this is all steel. The diesel Harrier also has the torsion beam rear suspension. But here, the electric Harrier, now this has got the 4-link independent rear suspension. And the new dampers also, together, they contribute to a driving experience that is significantly more superior to the ICE Harrier. Now, one thing I should point out, without any combustion engine to drown out the other noises, here you get a fair bit of wind noise. The blower, you can always hear it. In fact, for the first couple of minutes, I was trying to reduce the blower speed, thinking that the blower speed was too high, but it's on 1, and you can always hear that coming from the dash. the wind roar around the mirrors, around the sides, that's also fairly audible. The 9E has got better NVH. Wow, in fact, at triple digit speeds, there's a significant amount of wind roar. Significant. I guess that's where the 9E's acoustic glass makes a difference. And also that foam that is filled in the tires. And again, ride comfort. The ride quality of the Harrier is better than the 9E. I didn't think that would have been the case, considering that the 9E has got the semi-active dampers, the 5-link independent rear suspension. But yeah, the Harrier has got slightly better ride. Okay, and now the main event, cornering. Okay, first things first, the Harrier has got a fair bit more body roll. Whoa. More body roll, like I mentioned, more understeer than the 9E, and it doesn't feel as sure-footed and as capable or even as enthusiastic as the 9E when being hustled. This doesn't feel as happy being fired around corners as the Mahindra. So there you have the significant benefits of the suspension, the underpinnings of the 9E. Round corners, it feels more sure-footed, it feels better, it feels more confidence-inspiring, feels overall much nicer, feels more enthusiastic, and it actually eggs you on to push it harder around corners. Whereas the Harrier EV, after a while you say, okay, now this is the limit and let's not chance our arm. And it's only when you drive these two back to back that you realize these small nuances, like the brakes. The 9E's brakes set a really high benchmark, which the Harrier EV does not match up to. Now, in terms of traction, when there's some gravel on the road, the Harrier, it is able to put down its power better, for sure. All-wheel drive will definitely make a difference. Now, all those different all-wheel drive modes, I don't know any of you guys, if you even bought a Harrier electric, now all those different traction modes, those off-road modes, if you're buying an electric Harrier, even with the QWD, the all-wheel drive version, would you really go off-roading with it? My thought would be that, okay, you may be taking it to the farm, it has rain, there's a lot of slush, and then the Harrier electric will get you to the farmhouse, it will not leave you stranded. And that definitely is a proper use case for the all-wheel drive Harrier. And we have experienced it, we have tried it out on slushy situations, and it does pull through pretty admirably. Okay, back up our corners. You can feel the ESP working over time, and you know that it is not as enthusiastic or eager around these bends. Okay then, verdict, 9E versus the Harrier EV. In terms of handling, the 9E. In terms of ride comfort, the Harrier. In terms of the SUV feel, the Harrier. In terms of the brakes, the 9E. In terms of the general sense of sophistication on the road, long-legged feel, that's a tough one. I'd probably go with the 9E. Seats, Harrier. The driving position, Harrier. The general sense of occasion inside the cabin, the 9E. Of course, performance, the Harrier. So, all put together, net, looks like it's a tie. Yeah, but we don't do these ties at Evo. Now, if I had to choose purely in terms of driving dynamics, it would be the 9E. And that's purely because of the sophistication and the way it goes around corners. It just feels more involving, it feels happier, and it is more capable around corners than the Harrier. But the Harrier, ride comfort is better, and to sit at the back, well, the Harrier is better. We'll go check that out now. Now, in terms of the interiors, just by the sheer acreage of the digital real estate, you'll have to give this round to the 9E. Personally, I'm not a big fan of these massive screens, but also fact remains that this massive screen does lend a sense of occasion to the 9E's cabin. It just elevates it half a notch above the Harrier EV. Also, in terms of the functionality, there is a lot going on. If I dive into all of it, this video will probably be 3 hours long, so I won't get into all the nitty-gritties, save to point out one thing. This gets Qualcomm Snapdragon 8295 chipset, which is the most advanced automotive chipset in the world, and there's still a lot of functionality baked into it which can be released over time. This also has a really good Harman Kardon sound system, Dolby Atmos. It sounds really good. That groove mode with all the lighting drama, that's really cool. Overall, this cabin, well, it's hard to fault. It really is very nice. Only thing, white interiors, blue jeans, they don't make best friends. Step into the rear of the 9e and the first thing you notice, these doors, they open 90 degrees. So theoretically, that should make ingress, egress really easy. Except for the fact that this being an SUV coupe, you have this sloping rear roof line and you might knock your head against the roof. Now, in terms of space, this also is spacious. You get this massive glass roof, which is bigger than the panoramic roof of the Harrier, but this is a glass roof, it is fixed, it does not open. This also has all this lighting, mood lighting, it's got this groove mode, so it does this disco dance over here. You might get bored of it very quickly, but it does all that jazz. It gets a sun blind. What's really nice is that it has a provision for fitting screens. It's got a 65-watt charger out here. It's got a wireless charger there. And these screens, once you fit them, they are connected to the main infotainment. So the same movies that is playing on the passenger side screen also plays on the rear screens. So that is good. Now, the co-passenger seat, that's not electrically operated. So it has this boss mode function, but it is a manual boss mode and you can slide the seat in front. Also, in terms of space, this probably has an inch less space than the Harrier EV. You can still tuck in your toes under the driver's seat, under the front seats, and overall this is comfortable, but the Harrier Electric is slightly more comfortable. You can also adjust the recline angle of the seat back, but this is to the maximum recline and I don't think you will want less than this. So it's kind of like having just one recline angle. Oh, you get 3 headrests, not 2 like on the Harrier, but you don't have those wings like on the Harrier. I must point out the massive frunk on the 9e. Now the bonnet, it is suspended by these gas shocks, and just look at the size of this frunk. It's massive. It really is huge. The Harrier cabin, very nice, very nicely styled. The screen, nice and big. I don't think you'll ever want or need a bigger screen. But fact of the matter is that 9e's edge to edge, coast to coast, as they talk about it, that screen really has a sense of occasion that this probably doesn't. This also has this small digital cluster and all the numbers, typical Tata fashion, all these small numbers, they're hard to read. It's easier to read, more legible on the 9e. The gear selector, now this is the carryover part from their combustion vehicles, and even over there it doesn't work very well. Even here it is slightly fiddly to use. It has this illuminated logo in the steering wheel. Even the Mahindra now has the illuminated logo. It's got the JBL black audio system, which sounds very good. JBL versus Harman Kardon, which is better? Don't ask me that. You probably need a proper audiophile to actually evaluate the sound quality in both these cabins. But fact is that because Mahindra has thrown in everything, those 16 speakers, I think 1400 watts in that. So Tata also had to upgrade their sound system offering, and that means you really get very good sound systems in both the cars. Seats. Now both have got ventilated seats, but the Harriers, they feel slightly better, little bit more in terms of support. And during the first drives, I did point out that the Harrier seat does not slide far back enough, and I thought that that was a crazy error on Tata Motors' part. But turns out there was just a problem with that test piece that we drove. This one, the seats, they now slide far back enough so you can get a nice driving position, and overall this will make for a really nice and comfortable long distance electric cruiser. I should also point out this electric rear view mirror. So this is a camera and projects it onto the rear view mirror. It also has the dash cams front and back integrated into it. It records via the app. You can download all the data, all your driving stuff. So this is cool. And in fact, this is something that the 9e actually needs, because from the 9e, looking back through the inside rear view mirror, you can hardly see anything. Now in terms of space, the Harrier, it scores half a point more than the 9E. Two reasons for that. One is that because it does not have that coupe roofline, you get more headroom and that makes the cabin feel more airy. Also, you get probably 1 inch more of free knee room. You can tuck your toes in under the front seats. You get good under thigh support. You have these blinds, which is also there on the 9E. Now the sunroof, it's a sunroof. It's not a glass roof, and this is slightly smaller than the one on the 9E. What else? On the Harrier, you don't get a provision to fix a screen. There are no, oh, there is a 65 kilowatt charger over here, but on the 9E, it is out here. Also, the Harrier, it has this electric boss mode, so you can power, slide and recline the front seat out of the way. So for backseat passengers, this actually is very good. This also has these wings on the headrest, so that's a nice touch. But the backrest recline angle, that does not change. It is fixed in one position. But overall, it's nicer to be driven in the back of the Harrier EV. I should spend a minute talking about the styling of these two electric SUVs. Now, the 9E, you won't mistake this for anything else on the road, except for maybe the Urus, because this looks radical. This is in your face. This swoopy SUV coupe roofline, the connected lights, all the angles, all the jazz, the drama, the tamasha that's going on the 9E, that makes it an absolute head turner. But also, that means a lot of people will be put off by the styling of the 9E. A lot of people don't want something that is so in your face, so shouty, and for them, the Harrier Electric makes a lot of sense. This is a handsome SUV in the traditional sense. It is good looking, it will not offend anybody, it will please everybody. But what do you think? Which one do you prefer in terms of styling? The Harrier EV or the 9E? Let us know in the comments. So who makes the best electric car in this new premium electric SUV space? Well, I can first tell you who makes the most expensive vehicle in this space, and that is Mahindra. The 9E costs 31 lakh rupees, whereas the Harrier EV costs 29.5 lakh rupees. Of course, the stealth versions cost a little bit more, but there's around a 1.5 lakh price difference between the two. So if you're looking to save a little bit of money, the Harrier EV definitely. But if you are going to be spending 30 lakh rupees, 1.5 lakh rupees is not really going to make so much difference in your life. So you should be focusing on the stuff that actually makes a difference to your life. Now, the 9E, it scores in terms of the driving dynamics, the way it goes around corners. It is more sophisticated, more enjoyable and more enthusiastic. The brake response is better. The interiors, you get a better sense of joy and also that sense of occasion on the inside. And also, it looks like an Urus at 1/10 or 1/30th the price. The Harrier EV, it's got better ride quality. If you want to be chauffeur driven, it's got more space at the back. It also is more conventionally handsome. It's not as in your face and very extrovert as the 9E. So both have their strengths, and with either of the two, you cannot go wrong. But we have to pick one EV, and push come to shove, I would pick the 9E purely because of the way it goes round corners. Otherwise, these two, they are a fantastic testament to what Indian engineering can deliver.